So now let's get going with our kickoff address. So Cody W. Johnson is a seasoned executive with expertise in building and selling companies in the landmark sign, outdoor digital display, and architectural accent, rubber processing, plastic, molding, automotive component, and industrial supply sectors. He has a proven record of capitalizing on challenging economic conditions worldwide to improve business valuation and increase market share, as demonstrated recently by his hard pivot of National Signs LLC to manufacture much needed PPE face shields for Houston area hospitals, nursing homes, and first responders during the COVID-19 pandemic. Cody has lived, worked, and served on various boards in India, Mexico, and Malaysia. He has conducted business in Asia, Europe, Africa, and Latin America. Cody has a Juris Doctorate cum laude from the University of Houston. He earned his law degree while building an industrial supply company that was sold a year after his graduation to private equity. He concurrently studied international law and business at Peking University in Beijing, China, and Seton Hall's Foreign Scholarship Program in Zanzibar, Tanzania. He is a member of the Association for Corporate Growth, the Turnaround Management Association, and the Houston Economic Club. Let's all give a big welcome to Cody Johnson.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Houston's President's Forum for having me today. Also want to thank Rusty Smith, who's been my counselor, friend, and CEO coach along the journey that I will share with you. Finally, I'd like to thank the principals of Tolkien Management, National Signs private equity sponsor, Mr. Louis Gerard, Wirt Blaffer, and David Hartland for allowing me to lead National Signs during such an important period in the company's history and development. I've participated in this program for years and brought several of my divisional executives as well. I always found it pertinent, and I congratulate all of you for your investment in time and treasure to sponsor or participate in such a relevant event. As you just heard, my name is Cody Johnson. I'm the CEO of National Signs, a Tolkien management company headquartered here in Houston. I'm a proud product of Texas public education. I got my Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Stephen F. Austin, Axum Jacks, and I got my law degree from the University of Houston and Peking University in Beijing. My work and life experiences have frequently involved surviving and thriving during and immediately after a crisis, and I hope sharing what has worked and is working for me may be relevant to you today. All the businesses I'm going to talk about were or are middle market size businesses. So size does not keep my story from being your story. I've led oil and gas related manufacturing businesses through the oil and gas crisis of 1998, 2008, and 2015. I led my family ranch through droughts, hurricanes, and devastating ground worm infestations. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up. I led our residential real estate investment company through the housing crisis of 2008. I've led multinational businesses with operations in the nexus of the SARS epidemic of 2003, the MERS epidemic of 2012, and the swine flu epidemic of 2009. I contracted SARS and swine flu during those epidemics. I'm now leading National Signs through the recession and pandemic of 2020, and I had COVID-19 in July. However, none of those crises taught me as much as the crisis of October 11th, 1999. My son Noah was born 2 months premature that day because he has Charge syndrome. He weighed 4 pounds, had holes in his heart valves didn't work right, he couldn't breathe without his trachea collapsing, and he could not swallow without choking or drowning. Parts of his brain were missing or the wrong size amongst a laundry list of other abnormalities and complications. My wife and I were told time and time again that Noah was going to die. He did not come home for 18 months from the hospital. In his first 5 years, he went back and forth to the hospital 30 times in an ambulance and had 25 surgeries. He had the last rites performed on the same day that he was baptized. My wife and I were concurrently managing Noah's Care, building a multinational outsourcing business, and dealing with the oil crash in 1998 and the SARS epidemic. It would have been easy to have become overwhelmed and accept defeat. However, Noah kept fighting back, and so did we. Noah made it. I'm happy to report that Noah will celebrate his 21st birthday this weekend, surrounded by family and friends, at an appropriate social distance and wearing masks, and is a happy, healthy, beautiful young man. The business survived and was later sold to a strategic buyer. I obviously survived a highly symptomatic case of SARS, and it gave me COVID experienced T cells to help fight COVID-19 in July of this year. As a matter of fact, most of the businesses that I led through the previous economic and medical crises came out the other side intact, and a couple of them experienced lucrative liquidity events after the crises. In short, my life experiences at home, at work, and abroad have forged my beliefs about how one should lead through a crisis, and I'm grateful to get a chance to share those with you today. But before I do, I need to set the stage by introducing National Signs. National Signs was founded in 1992. Token Management, a Houston-based private equity group, purchased it from the founder in 2012. National Signs is the recognized premier provider in Texas of landmark signage, outdoor electronic messaging centers, and architectural accents. Additionally, National Signs is a platinum distributor of Daktronics outdoor electronic messaging centers and offers the only low price guarantee in the state. Our portfolio includes such local Houston landmarks as NRG Stadium, the Smart Financial Center in Sugar Land, Lakewood Church, and Gallery Furniture. Our shop and offices are near the intersection of Alameda and Holly Hall in the southeast corner of the Texas Medical Center. We design, fabricate, and install signage for customers in all 50 states and several countries. I came to National Signs in December of 2019, about 90 days prior to the pandemic and recession. In that first 90 days, I hired my executive leadership team to execute on getting National Signs to the next level operationally and financially. Of course, none of us knew we would be leading National Signs through a pandemic and a pandemic-caused recession. Our CFO was the last member of the executive team to get onboarded, and we had to do it using Skype. She was stuck in Arkansas and worked there for the first 2 months of the job. When the probabilities of the ranges of scope and magnitude of the COVID pandemic and recession became clear in March, my executive leadership team and I went to my toolkit and belief set relevant to managing through crises. Step one for us is get lean and mean. There are hard and soft leadership skills involved here. On the soft skills side, I think a lot of Winston Churchill leading Great Britain, and particularly London, through the years of Nazi bombing during World War II. Churchill was honest with his constituent about the dire facts, but he also gave them a vision of hope for an outcome where the sacrifice was worth his envisioned outcome. That prepared everyone for the sacrifices that they needed to make to not only survive, but to ultimately win. Then you have to make the sacrifices early. As they say, measure twice and cut once. You need to assure your people, if possible, this is the group you're going forward with into battle, and no one who is fighting will get left behind. Make sure you let your people know that this is not the Alamo. In other words, there are going to be losers. Perhaps there's going to be a lot of losers, but there's also going to be winners, and you have a plan to win. Be mindful that your team will process the massive amount of high velocity change at different rates. As CEOs and presidents, you probably process change at a much faster rate than the rest of your team. Use the Kubler-Ross change curve to recognize the stages and communicate with your team. If your VP of sales is in shock, your VP of operations is in denial, and your CFO is in depression, and you're in the decision stage, you're not going to be very productive. Getting your leadership team in the same stage of the Kubler-Ross change curve is a necessary early step to reestablish alignment with all stakeholders. On the hard skills side, this means identify and cut all necessary costs to conserve cash. Take a hard look at initiatives that take cash and time resources that may no longer be relevant or need to just be put on ice until things get better or clearer. You eventually have to be honest with yourself about how many people you can afford, and you have to make the adjustment. For me, this usually means a combination of layoffs and salary reductions. Step two for us is kill or be killed. I start out by reminding our team that it takes as little as 10% loss of revenue to upend most companies. Moreover, few companies can survive a loss of 30% to 50% of their revenue. The important part here is to focus on the 50 to 90% of business these failing companies can no longer service. I want to go hunt for that business. I'd rather have 25% of a $100 million market than 10% of a $200 million market. The problem with this, the challenge with this strategy is that it takes competitors a long time to die. So you need to expedite the process. We try to pick a competitor or two and go after their customers, their vendors, and their key employees simultaneously. The key is the concurrent focused attack on all fronts, with the objective being to tactically help the invisible hand of capitalism work in right-sizing market capacity with market demand. Internally, we call this running the gauntlet. If you successfully run the gauntlet, you own a big enough piece of the market to thrive. Every crisis is different, but I typically think of running the gauntlet taking 6 to 12 months. Interestingly, National Signs has 3 major direct competitors that have closed their doors or decreased staffs to levels where they cannot service major clients. However, National Signs is hiring. I think of step 3 as expanding our hunting geography. To me, this really means diversify. I think of the typical quadrant chart where you analyze selling new or existing products and services to new or existing customers. During the 1998 oil and gas Asian financial flu, it meant leading my Malaysian oil and gas products company selling predominantly in Asia to become the largest provider of FDA and NSF certified elastomer liners for butterfly valves in America. During the 2015 oil and gas crisis, it meant leading my American oil and gas products company selling predominantly in America to become the largest producer of air spring suspension components to companies like Goodyear, Continental, and Firestone, who had assembly factories predominantly in Mexico. During the current COVID pandemic and recession, it meant pivoting to make face shields and sneeze guards, and it meant aggressive marketing and hiring in the North and Central Texas markets. Finally, I think of step 4 as focusing on the haves market, or what has recently been coined as the K-shaped recovery. Every crisis causes disruption that reorders the market's problems and priorities. Successful companies solve problems for their customers with elegant, efficient solutions, and we're rewarded with profit. Successful companies will pivot their product and services to be intentionally relevant to the reordered priorities of the market. During and on the tail of a crisis, some companies are being harmed and some companies are being helped. Every hurricane, tornado, and earthquake create billions of dollars of cleanup and construction work. Every oil and gas crisis is an effective tax cut for businesses that use a lot of energy. The housing crisis of 2008 created opportunities for real estate investors to buy properties very cheap that they can divest now for impressive returns. For National Signs, the COVID pandemic and recession created opportunities for signage removals at closed businesses, signage bills and installs for businesses needing to move to a larger footprint so they can increase their social distance, or a smaller footprint to reduce the lease expense. It also created opportunities to deepen relationships with companies like Lowe's, Amazon, Home Depot, which are all benefiting from the pandemic economy. In so doing, we noticed that the incremental sales dollars these customers spent on expensive electronic messaging centers convert to drastically better EBITDA margins because these incremental sales dollars don't require any additional operating leverage to process. And finally, it created an opportunity for National Signs to pivot to make COVID relevant products like PPE face shields and acrylic barriers for hospitals, schools, and many other essential businesses. The last move has garnished us a lot of earned media for our team at National Signs this year. Here's a picture of Jim Cramer wearing a face shield while he gave National Signs a 4.5-minute shout out in April on Mad Money on CNBC. We were also the cover story of the Houston Business Journal on May 1st, the day the stay home, stay safe order was lifted here in Houston. Additionally, we've been featured in several local and regional media, print, and webcast production. It all started in March with our team simply wanting to help fight back against COVID. We wanted to be relevant. By May, we saw that we could help keep Texas safe and help keep Texas working. By then, we had learned how to produce a globally competitive price point. We had learned how to market the products and how to sell the products. Importantly, we had also learned how to operate an opportunistic PPE business alongside our core signage business with an appropriate and acceptable level of disruption and distraction. The squeeze was worth the juice. Whilst National Signs will continue to provide PPE, medical face shields, and custom acrylic barriers so long as there is a need, premier landmark signage, outdoor electronic messaging centers, and architectural accents are our core business now and forever. We're proud to be working with customers such as Lowe's, Home Depot, Amazon, Memorial Hermann, Houston Methodist on both PPE and signage projects. We are humbled and proud to be working with the community of Santa Fe to build a memorial for the 10 school shooting victims there in 2018. We're excited to be working with dozens of middle market businesses, many of you that I know are in the audience today, on signage to help market your business more efficiently and effectively. I've included in my PowerPoint 4 of the tools that Rusty Smith has introduced to me over the years that I found to be most relevant in our journey at National Signs this year. The first is the aforementioned Kubler-Ross change curve. Leading through a crisis requires awareness and management of a new threat to alignment. Stakeholders processing change at a vastly different rate make it all but impossible to effectively work as a team to analyze situations, make decisions, and execute plans. Use the Kubler-Ross change curve to get everyone to the experiment, decision, and integration phases together, and importantly, quickly. The second is Mike Michalowicz's Pyramid of Basic Needs of an SME, small to medium enterprise, presented in his book, Fix This Now, which is a twist on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Many of you were likely working on the impact or the legacy of your business and your career prior to March. Today, most of you are all likely working on sales or profit. To unexpectedly get knocked off working on your impact or legacy, to scratching to survival due to a cause outside of your visibility or control will unsettle the toughest of us. Worse yet, left unaddressed, the disruption in spirit can cascade through the entire organization, creating disorganization. Again, it can be an alignment destroyer. I recommend using this tool to explain to your team the necessity, and the nature of the pivot that you need to plan and execute. The third tool is the Noster Model for managing complex change. While executing complex change quickly under duress, emotions of your leadership team can be an excellent high-velocity data point for where your issues lie. If you sense confusion is the predominant emotion, then your employees do not understand your vision yet. If, however, you sense anxiety is the predominant emotion, then your employees do not understand your vision. If, however, you sense anxiety is the predominant emotion, probably there's a skill set problem. If the building is full of frustration, then you probably have not given your team the resources to accomplish the plan. And if you keep experiencing false starts, then you likely lack a clear, achievable plan, and so on and so forth. Recommend that you use this tool to turn human emotions from your team into high velocity, useful, relevant data to help you execute and win. The final tool is a very comprehensive operating system to help you achieve and maintain alignment even during times of crisis. The Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, as debuted in Gino Wickman's book Traction, is one of the many systems you can and should choose from that are priceless for middle market businesses like ours to create and maintain growth and continuous operational and financial improvement. If you haven't yet chosen such a system, I highly recommend that you do so quickly. So far, I've talked a lot about business and leading business through times of crisis because I suppose that's what I'm most qualified to talk about. However, at this point in our national history, it's heavy on my heart to also talk about experience with a crisis that has lasted longer and is deeper seated than any economic or medical crisis that I've experienced. My entire career has been in manufacturing, and after just a few years in business back in the 1990s, I noticed that there were almost no brown or black people that worked on the carpet. They all worked on the concrete. I made it a point to quietly look into our vendors, customers, and my employers' other customers, companies. I quietly looked into our banks and our shareholders' offices. I found very few, if any, examples of black or brown managers or professionals. This was surprising to me because it was so inconsistent with my recent experience getting my undergraduate degree from Stephen F. Austin, where I played defensive end on the football team. I was an academic All-American, which means I was a mediocre player with a 4.0 GPA. The reason I mention that, other than to hopefully get a laugh, is that my predominantly black teammates and I shared a very similar background with regards to education and life experiences by the time that we graduated. However, I was obviously afforded opportunities that they were not. Today, when I talk to my black, educated, successful teammates, neighbors, friends, and colleagues, they tell me quietly that they fear every time their sons and daughters leave the house that they'll be harmed, potentially by a police officer instead of the police officer protecting them. However, when I talk to my law enforcement friends, they tell me their families fear for their lives every time that they leave the house. I know that both groups are being sincere. As Houston's police chief, Art Acevedo, told Christian Amanpour this year, people of color don't tell me that they want less policing, but what they absolutely tell me is that they want better policing. Empathy is a huge component of effective leadership. It's easy for me to believe and empathize with my black, educated, successful friends that they want and need better policing. Additionally, while I see more managers and professionals today in business that are not white, heterosexual men, I don't see anywhere near the representation one would expect based on population data. I believe the problem is obvious. The solution is both simple and incredibly difficult. I believe that the most effective thing we as business leaders can do is to realize that there is a deep pool of talent being overlooked by companies to fill management and professional positions. I've found some of these candidates need more mentoring, but less managing. They are hungry and able to do the work. They just need someone to mentor them on expectations fearlessly and frankly. Many make your hiring decisions based on gets it, wants it, and can do it, not based on race, gender, or sexual orientation. And you'll find awesome hires on which your competitors ignorantly passed. My final recommendations to you are all as simple and not easy. Do not run out of cash. Be aggressive. Manage high velocity change intentionally. Prioritize diversity, creativity, and adaptability. Focus on alignment. And in the best traditions of Winston Churchill, keep calm and carry on. In closing, I'll borrow a line I heard from Jim McIngvale at an event like this one years ago. How many of you believe in free speech? Well, that's what I'm giving you today, a free speech. So please do me a solid if you enjoyed it by sending us some business to National Signs. Call us at 713-863-0600 or email us at info@nationalsigns.com. We would love to work with you on your next signage project, no matter how big or small. We currently have deep discounts on our Daktronics electronic messaging centers and no payment for 90-day financing. Mention President's Forum and this speech, and you'll get an additional 10% off of any signage project signed between now and the end of the year. I hope you found some ideas in this speech today that are relevant and actionable. Thank you again to TEI for asking me to speak today, to Tolkien Management for being an awesome PE sponsor of National Signs, and to my executive leadership team for doing all the heavy lifting so I can do speeches like this one. If we have time for questions, I'd be glad to take some.
Thank you, Cody. That was wonderful, very inspiring. And on behalf of everyone, I'd love to wish your son, Noah, a happy 21st birthday. That was a great story.
Thank you.
So I'd like to encourage everyone to ask questions, and I will get them. We've got a few minutes with Cody. But I'll start with one. I wanted to ask you a question. You were talking about layoffs, and layoffs are always difficult for everybody involved. How do you get your leadership aligned when you have to do that?
It's all about being able to speak frankly, and what's helpful is if you've built a culture where that it's a safe place inside the leadership room and meeting to be able to speak your mind. And you also have to have a culture where you make decisions based on data, and you have to stick to those disciplines, especially during these times.
That's great. Thank you. Very interesting how you were one of the companies that shifted to PPE. What percentage, as you went along, of your business went to PPE? What percentage is now PPE? And I'm really curious, how do you market National Signs when you're developing PPE? Like what's the balance?
Sure. So our signage business has stayed steady, thank God, which we think is a win in this environment. We previously, sold a lot of signs to restaurants, retail, which we're no longer selling. So our other market verticals have picked up. Our sales and marketing team, led by our Vice President Matthew Nicolay, has done an excellent job there. PPE though has become about half of our sales in the last quarter. So the business has grown based on that. And we're being very careful to be able to service our community and create and install the PPE needed at hospitals, schools, first responders, nursing homes. But we're not overextending the business where that if, as we all pray, the need for all of this PPE goes away in the next 6 to 12 months, that the business will be harmed. So what we're very careful from an cash allocation standpoint is we're taking the profits from the PPE and we're reinvesting those in the sign business, so that as COVID goes away and if PPE goes away or reduces dramatically, we'll have built our sign business. So one is feeding the other at the moment.
Yeah, you were very fortunate to have that pivot in your business. Okay, we've got more questions. Cody, you have been through some amazing market changes. How does COVID compare to others for your business? And were there certain actions required that you had not experienced before?
Sure, great question. So, I believe in when one of the things I think about with crises is I'm always looking for a pivot to diversify, and I think about Newton's third law of motion, where that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if one group is being harmed, typically another group is being aided, helped, and the typical example of that is, particularly in Houston, if oil and gas goes down, then airlines are benefiting because of the lower fuel cost. Well, during COVID, finding the winners is more difficult. So there's more losers and fewer winners to choose from. So to make sure you're on the right leg of that K-shaped recovery, you've got to be marketing, you've got to be selling to somebody that's in a very small group of winners. And that is the smaller winner set in this recession is the main thing that's different.
Wonderful. And we have time for one more question. Which aspect or tool of EOS made the most immediate and secondly, the most long-term impact on your organization? And did you self-implement or did you hire a professional implementer?
So I'll answer the first question first. We've implemented EOS in 6 countries, 6 companies, 4 countries, 3 continents. I have with various leadership teams, but it was introduced to me, and our first implementation was with Rusty Smith, and so he implemented our first time, and then since then, because I've been doing it for so many years, we did a self-implementation at National Signs. And culture, the vision component is always the most important component to me, and out of that, culture is the most important section of that. So if your team knows and buys into and agrees with where you're going, and you share the same culture, I find that you can make it through almost anything. I believe in the old adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Absolutely. Culture is what drives a business. So thank you so much, Cody Johnson of National Signs. We appreciate your time. It was a wonderful presentation.